I am quite surprised that throughout the years nobody has talked about this before. And I mean this because either you guys don't know how the Bendy buses are deployed exactly or why they are deployed to a certain service, or y'all just don't know how to explain, convey, why the deployments are as of such. So I'm just gonna explain Woodlands. This is common knowledge by now, but this one runs Bendy buses daily, and these three only pretty much run it on weekdays. Now, some weekends they will run, but it is not guaranteed. So 912, East Loop, it will come back, and then go on to the West Loop. And as long as the West Loop trip isn't operating as 912B, they would come back, they would lay over here for around 10 minutes or so, then they would continue the trip back. So it's due to a simple reason. The 912 bendies, they don't have to go back to park. They can just lay over here at the alighting berth, the Avenue 3 side. Like I said before, if they want to go back to park, they would just run a 912B trip. That's it. Pretty simple. And it's simply because of this reason. It's because choosing to lay over here is way more efficient than going back to park after every single trip. And that is the sole reason why 912 runs Bendy buses daily. In short, it just means simpler operations. Now I'll tell you why the Woodlands feeder buses need Bendy buses. I mean, checkpoint is one thing. Every single West Loop except 913, it goes to a checkpoint. Nothing new, but let's start with 912. The West Loop, the reason why it needs Bendy buses is because one school over here and another school. And Woodlands Avenue 1, other than 967, is only served by 912. So that's the reason why 912 and 912B has Bendy buses. Moving on to 913, one school, two schools, three schools, MRT station, all the flats surrounding this general area. That's the reason why 913 needs bendies. In terms of distance and the actual runtime, simply because 856 has a tendency to get clogged at opposite Marsiling MRT station, 911 is the fastest way from Woodlands to the train checkpoint. And along its way, it serves all the flats around here. And you can see under construction, Marsiling Cascadia. Yeah. And a lot of these flats, I think, around this general area, they are new. And the demand for 911 West Loop has increased over the years. And that's the reason why it needs bendies. The fastest way from Woodlands to the train checkpoint. And then 903 and M. In short, okay, I know Republic Polytechnic, sometimes there is demand coming from here towards Woodlands, but generally 903 and M, the demand is basically the flats here. It is only served by 903. And one more thing, Friday prayers at An-Nur Mosque. Everything except 913 passes by An-Nur Mosque. You can access it from the bus stops along Admiralty Road or Woodlands Center Road. I apologize for how small this is, but I'll try to explain. And 913's East Loop is the one that needs the bendy buses the most, simply because, I mean, there's demand along Woodlands Avenue 7, of course, but from Admiralty all the way to Woodlands Avenue 6 and Circle. The only bus service going into Woodlands Circle. And the distance from Admiralty to Woodlands Circle is like less than 10 stops, less than 5 stops. That's the reason why it needs bendy buses badly. I will be very honest, 912's East Loop doesn't really require like bendy buses as much, maybe just one or two during peak hours and that's all. And the reason is because, okay, Woodlands Avenue 7 is served by like lots of buses, Woodlands Avenue 5 is served by 962 and Avenue 6 as well. I mean 962 also needs bendies, but like because 912A, the catchment is like Drive 50 and Woodlands Ring Road as well as like Admiralty Station. The catchment is like sort of in between. So 912A's like catchment is like unique, but unless you live like, you know, really close to Drive 50 or Woodlands Ring Road, you can go outside, you know, the main roads and not the streets. You can choose to take either 912 from the smaller street or 962 from the bigger street, and the main road there's loads of buses. So 912A is something that like, how do you say it? It's a short service. Like sometimes it needs bendy buses, sometimes it doesn't. So you don't necessarily have to prioritize it. And honestly, on like weekends, you don't really need to run bendy buses on 912's East Loop at all. Okay, I didn't really draw the looping point correctly. It's something like this, but you get the idea. 911's East Loop, to be frank, doesn't really require like a whole load of bendy buses. Okay, it's simply because outside Avenue 7, Avenue 4, there is like 858. And then 911 just does this like loop the loop thing. There is demand, and on peak hours it needs like the high capacity buses, but it's not like the biggest priority when it comes to like bendy bus deployment, simply because like there are other options. Like I said, this one is 858, and then this side over here there is like 169. So yeah, it's the same logic. This 911 thingy is like enclosed between 169 and 858. So yeah, this is the reason why there is demand, but it's not like as high as like 913. Something along those lines. 913 actually has high demand. The only reason why not every single bus is filled is because it's being over deployed. They should run less buses, run more bendies, run less SDs. Yeah, that's about it. This one has bendy buses sometimes, like it can be like every few days, once every week, or like usually it's like once or twice every month. Usually once every month, I would say. The worst it can go up to is like once every 2 months or once every 3 months. But yeah, it's very random like I explained before. This one and M, bendy buses are like very rare. So normally they don't have it. And that's cause like 901's route is like, it's just like this. And then 901M goes here. It's a pretty long feeder service, and it's like, I don't know, this is the kind of route whereby you don't really need to like prioritize bendy bus deployment at all. It's the same thing for 900. 900 technically can be run with like single decker buses. But yeah, you only really need the bendy buses during like special occasions, like when sports school has some like event, I don't know. Oh, and one more thing, maybe on Fridays as well, cause this is a relatively new mosque that opened in like the late 2010s, I think. So yeah. But then if you're going to the mosque, there's like 900, 901, and 967. So it's not like you really have to put the Bendy buses on 900 or anything, even on Fridays. So now let's talk about the random deployments. This one is exclusively stunts. I mean, I think 904 can have like 1 or 2 at most Bendy buses during peak hours, but like it's not a priority like now, cause 913 needs it the most. This one is like incredibly rare. This one is like incredibly rare. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that they can play around. Actually only 5 because 912's Bendy Bus Deployment isn't like random or anything. Okay, you can say like the B 912B, the Bendys that run exclusively on 912B, they usually like cross over from 903. But like the Bendy buses that run on 912B, they only run during peak hours. So I guess you could count that, but like, yeah. So every single weekday, I'm not talking about weekends, even though weekends sometimes the Bendy buses might run, but it is again subject to Bendy bus train bus captain availability, because it's unrealistic for like to make them work like Monday to Sunday. So the bus captains on 912 weekends, they would be different from the bus captains on 912 weekdays. Again, I do not have the specifics, but how they allocate it, it's basically based on the number of Bendy train bus captains available during the day, assuming that no one like falls sick or takes leave or something along those lines. And this one is dependent on like the starter, the depot starter. Like they have the final say when it comes to the deployments. But what is it actually based on? The starters actually base it on like projected demand. The keyword here is projected. So whether like the bus services would have this demand or not, like in reality is another thing, but they just base it on the projected, like, you know, so-called guessed demand. So what I mean is that like, you know, from Mondays to Thursdays, okay, like SBS Transit, some services have a Friday timetable. It's like a special timetable, but this is not SBS Transit we're talking about right now. But again, Monday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, the reason why Saturday and Sunday, you know, like I used to like look at them separately because of 964's it wasn't like full day on Saturdays. Its last trip is like in the evening, and on Sundays 964 didn't run last time, but now they changed it so that like 964 now operates every single day all the way till like I forgot, it's like 9 or 10 or 11. I completely forgot, but anyways, obviously the demand for like the different services listed here is gonna be different from Monday to Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. And the reason for that is because on Friday you have like a lot of demand that's like going back to Malaysia via 911. Sometimes they take 903 if 911 gets too crowded. You kind of get the idea. And then on Fridays, the Muslim boys, they need to go for their Friday prayers. So yeah, the demand for like the West loops minus 913, they as in like they might have to put more Bendy buses there. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, you could prioritize putting the Bendy buses on 911. I'm just saying theoretically. And then like Mondays to Thursdays, 913's demand, be it East or West Loop, it just explodes. During the school dismissal times and when there is like a huge crowd influx coming from either Marsiling or Admiralty MRT, especially Admiralty, they can take 964, but if they're going to Woodlands Circle, they can only take 913. So again, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that like there is a lot of like this randomness when it comes to demand. It's not like fixed or anything. And you also have to take into account like festive seasons, I think, like Lunar New Year, and then there is like Eid al Fitri, which is like Hari Raya in Malaysia and Singapore. They call it Hari Raya Puasa. I don't know if Haji will get demand, but it's mostly Puasa. So yeah. Sorry, my screen was cut off. So let me just give you all an example. So obviously SMRT, they want to run like about 3 to 4 or like 2 to 3 bendy buses on 912. If it runs like 2 only, then there will be bendy buses on 912B, like confined to here. But basically, like SMRT, they want to run it on 912, but then okay, theoretically, instead of putting them all on 912, technically you could also do it like this. So let me erase this. So you can technically do it in such a way that like on Mondays to Thursdays, you put majority of the bendy buses on 913, and then you prioritize 912's West Loop, followed by 911, and then 903. You can do it like that. And on Fridays, okay, it's a thing in Singapore whereby like people coming from CBD, there is less people coming from CBD on Fridays because typically for most of like the white collar workers, it's like a work from home thing. So like technically you would expect there to be like less commuters coming from like Marsiling or Admiralty, North-South line. I mean, theoretically it would be like that, but turns out that's not the case because they're like students. It's not just white collar workers. They're like blue collar workers. Like for example, they come from 964, the Woodlands Industrial Estate, stuff like that. But yeah, but again, you can also do it like this. On Fridays, you again prioritize it for 913, and instead of like putting them all on 912 West, you could put them on 911 again to cater to people who are returning to Malaysia on Fridays. Then followed by 912 West and then 903. But again, this isn't necessarily the only thing that you have to consider because it's like 911 serves the mosque, 912 serves the mosque, 903 also serves the mosque. This one basically has the best access to An-Nur Mosque. So with that in mind, like you might have a different opinion and that's completely fine. Maybe you, instead of prioritizing so much on 913 on Fridays, given that like most people are working from home, so there isn't like a whole lot of people coming from the MRT stations. Again, that's just an assumption, but if you want to base it on that, that's completely fine. So you can kind of like reverse the order, and instead of doing this, you make it such that you prioritize it on like 911 West Loop. So not only do you cater to the Friday prayers, you're also catering to the people going back to Malaysia. You encourage them to take 911 and not like 903 or 856 or anything. Because you put a bendy bus on 911 West, people would gladly move to the back. I mean, there might be a few stubborn commuters, like every single country, even Japan has them, but like, I'm just saying, in general, you can like prioritize stuff like that. I mean, you can switch the order for this. And on Saturdays and Sundays, 912 West, because it's like, again, now there's like 967 and 912, you don't have to like prioritize 912 West Loop on, as in you don't have to prioritize putting bendy buses on 912 West Loop on weekends. In fact, I think you don't even need to run it at all. like you don't even need to run Bendy buses on 912 at all during weekends. Okay, to play safe, maybe the full 912 you might want to put like one or two, something along those lines, but like again, the checkpoint demand on like on Saturdays and Sundays, it's actually quite crazy, as well as like public holidays as well. So again, prioritize 911. And in this case, you could choose to like prioritize 903 over 913 during weekends, and that's completely fine as well. And like again, this is just an example, like if we don't confine most of the Bendy buses to 912. So I mean, instead of putting them on 913, you could even choose to do this one thing whereby you only run 913 Bendy buses on the west loop, meaning you just confine them to T, stuff like that. And then on the east loop, basically the buses doing the full 913 route, you could just downgrade every single one of them to single deckers, but in compensation, 964, 964, 964, and 964. You can even choose, like, again, if you're able to pull it off, then that would be good as well. I'm just giving an example to like illustrate that like you don't necessarily have to like follow whatever I say here. You, as a starter, you could put the Bendy buses on 964 instead of 913, so that you not only cater to Admiralty and Woodlands Avenue 6, you're catering to the demand coming from the industrial estate as well, because some people from there they take 964, some people they take 858, but if they're going to Admiralty they would take 964, the MRT I mean. So yeah, this is how you could do it. And the beauty about this like whole random deployment is that even if like let's say I follow SMRT, they say that like making the 912 buses layover at the alighting berth is like way more worth it as compared to like putting the Bendy buses on other services. Let's say I follow SMRT, I can still pull off the same thing, because the whole thing about the random deployment is that I can deploy it instead of, okay, like they all have a fixed permanent bus service. Yes, that's correct, but it's like this random deployment based on allocation, I'm just trying to say it works. So even if you prioritize 912 for like every single day, I can still do the same thing, like 913, I put this on 911, and I put this on like 911. And then so on and so forth. 913, can switch it up a little bit. So basically 912 gets the bulk of the Bendy buses, and it's pretty much the same thing like I've described it. And again, you can choose to run them on 964 instead. To be honest, I don't think it's like that worth it to put the Bendy buses on 964 during weekends. There is still demand coming from the industrial estate, but you know, you could put it so that it caters to more of like the residential demand during the weekends. That's completely fine as well. Like again, like I'm just giving an example of how it's possible to allocate your Bendy buses based on this kind of like random allocation deployment kind of thing. Okay, moving away from Woodlands, this is just an extra bit of the video that you don't really have to listen to, but you know, just another example. Yishun, they used to do this crossover. Now they don't anymore. Sorry, not crossover. It's like on weekdays they would run 807, and on weekends that one Bendy bus would do 800 instead. So they chose not to do it anymore. So instead of putting it on 800, you can put the Bendy buses on like any of these instead, like during the weekends. Yishun is like, it runs Bendy buses full day anyway, so I don't really have to like talk much about it. And then even if you say Gali Batu, Kranji Depot, yeah, on weekdays you can, I know sometimes they run on like 190, but it's negligible. So on weekdays you on weekdays you confine most of them to 180 and 184, and you just spam single deckers on 302. Maybe you put one to two bendy buses on here. That's completely fine. And then during weekends when the bendy buses don't run, you just throw it to 302. Again, it's sort of like a random deployment as well. You can control the number of bendy buses that you want to deploy on any particular day. So this is basically the advantage to having this like random deployment system rather than having them like perm services or like have a fixed deployment. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, to sum it up, as long as you don't go around throwing the bendy buses on other services that don't really need them and robbing 858 of bendy buses, then I'm fine with it.